Hello and welcome to another rather special episode of the Fully Charged podcast. We're recording this on the stage at Fully Charged Live in Harrogate, and it's the only way we can do it because we've got a very limited window to where we've got access to our rather remarkable and very impressive guest today on the show. So I'm actually on the stage here. That is the stage behind me. And in front of me is a huge amount of empty seats, with one or two slightly frustrated members of the Fully Charged crew who just want to go and have their tea. But anyway, so we're going to get on with this really quickly. I'm really excited about this because this is someone we've never had on the show before, a proper CEO of a major, and I mean globally major, automotive manufacturing company. We're talking Ford. We're talking Jim Farley. He is an amazing man. This is an incredible conversation. The stuff he talks about is really fascinating. There's stuff about the F-150, which we kind of talked about quite a lot because we've got one here at the show and it's getting a lot of interest. A very wide-ranging discussion. He worked at Toyota. He now works at Ford. His vision for how to electrify a massive company like Ford is really impressive. I think you're going to love it. Please do subscribe to the Fully Charged podcast because they are amazing episodes with incredible people on them. And tell your mates about it. And please welcome to the Fully Charged podcast the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley. One of the first questions I wanted to ask you was your history with Ford and where, how, because I don't know how long you've been there, but you've been there a long time.
No, actually, I'm a unicorn. I spent 25 years at Toyota.
Right.
And,
okay.
But my grandfather started the company when he was 13 years old as an hourly worker.
Wow.
So when in 07, 06, it looked like the domestic car companies were going to go bankrupt, I had a kind of personal tragedy. My wife and I did. So I had been offered a job to come to Ford as an executive by Bill Ford earlier. And I always said no because I love Toyota and I worked around the world for Toyota in Japan and Europe and the US. There were four of us who started Lexus,
Right.
in the late 80s. So it was like, it was really a great place for me. But I saw the company struggling and I called Bill and just said, I'd like to help. I don't want Ford to go bankrupt. I want to do my part. And my wife and I moved back here with 3 newborns, and that was 15 years ago. So I know I worked at Toyota far longer than Ford, but I have a kind of spiritual connection because my grandfather was an hourly worker.
That is amazing, isn't it? Because that was I've been fascinated by since I've been interested in electric vehicles with that really early history.
Yes.
Henry Ford working for Thomas Edison for 9 years. I didn't realize that,
Oh,
that
yes.
was,
And, people don't realize this and we can get into it, but I do a lot of research on the industry. I'm just, cars is pretty much all I care about in life. And in 1910, our industry had more than 1,000 car companies.
Yeah.
And steam was 1/3 sales share.
Wow.
Electric was 1/3 and combustion engine was 1/3. In 1910, it was not obvious at all what technology was going to win the race. It could have easily been electric.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm very lucky. I've managed to drive an early electric car and early steam car. I drove an early steam car, which was a mixture of really impressive and terrifying, because that was I guess it was a kerosene burner that was heating the water, and that when that went out and then relit, it was quite. They must have been terrifying vehicles to drive, the steam cars.
They were, yeah. That's why electric was so popular.
Yeah.
My grandfather, before he started Ford as a young kid, his job, there was the biggest car company in Detroit was called Detroit Electric.
Yes.
And every night they would, and 90% of the customers were wealthy women.
Right.
And they were so much easier to operate. But they had a depot charging model where every customer's cars went back to a depot to get charged overnight and then returned to the house to be used. And so, yeah, electric, even here in Detroit, electric was huge. It was the biggest car company then.
Isn't that amazing? God, that is so. Yes, I didn't realize how big it was. I've seen like the beautiful old sort of engraved commercials for Detroit electric cars.
Yeah.
I didn't realize
Have you done the Brighton? I'm sure you've done the Brighton, the tour from
Yes, in the past, yeah, years ago, I have done that. Yeah, yeah. Yes, we're often asked to go and do it. So we've got access at the moment to. I'm not even sure what make it is. A 1902 electric vehicle that we
oh,
had at our last show. So So we're gonna try and review that like you would review a modern car. Yeah. But
well,
it's a little
Bewley,
bit dangerous. The
you have
steering
some
is
great museums there and
yeah
some great private collectors.
collections
So
and things. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. But then, well, I mean, I think what is exciting now is, and this is, I mean, the fact that you worked at Toyota, which I do now recall when I looked at my notes, but that is it is a topic of hot discussion here. So we've had a lot of on this stage today, a lot of really well informed people from the automotive industry and journalists who study this stuff. And when people ask, which car companies are going to flourish and which are going to
Hmm.
suffer with the transition to electrification, my big worry is for some of the smaller European brands, or the kind of niche European brands, but mainly for Toyota, because I was a big Toyota fan. The Prius I thought was a remarkable piece of technology. What Toyota did in those years when you were working there was truly, it really upset the apple cart. They really were an amazing challenge to traditional combustion engines. And, I went from a very petrol thirsty Volkswagen Golf with a big engine to a Prius. And immediately my gasoline bill went down by about three quarters. It was a real noticeable change. And yet now it feels like Toyota have kind of stayed in that place, whereas companies like Ford now are really, really stepping up the changes.
Yeah, we could talk about Prius a while. I was you know, set up the marketing for the first generation that no one talks
Right.
about anymore. The second
Yeah.
generation really changed things, but the first generation was really forced on the U.S. American Toyota leadership team,
Right.
and we actually went to a direct model. We sold it direct to the customer, um, and we sold them one by one. And the car was only developed to be for short distance suppliers in the Keiretsu in Japan. So we
Right.
didn't have even
Wow.
a left-hand drive model. The first generation was imported in the U.S. as right-hand drive, um, and basically sold it to educators and, um, of course, NGO leaders that were into electric cars. The RAV4 EV was our first, and
Yeah.
that pretty much failed. And actually, we had to crush all of them by law. They were all lead acid batteries, and so we didn't think at that time after RAV4 that Prius would be successful. And boy, were we wrong.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fight within the American leadership at Toyota, which wound up being the biggest Prius market in the world, California, where we
Yeah.
were headquartered. There was a lot of arguments about, whether this was worth the trip or not. But anyways, I don't want to get distracted. I'm
Yeah.
sure you have lots of cool stuff to talk about, but I have a very deep background in the Prius. And, I kind of, to bring it back to our current reality, I think what's a danger when you make a vehicle about its propulsion system is that by nature it becomes a commodity. And um, when it becomes a commodity and it competes on price and really it's only a rational purchase, you can make the argument that the adoption of the technology gets really risky, because there's only what 20-30% of the market that wants a generic A to B car.
Right.
Um, so I think this is really one of Tesla's most challenging moments. They got through Model 3 and Model Y commercialization in the plant and scaling production. The next big test turns out to be their heavy discounting to stimulate demand, which is a sugar high, and it continues to deteriorate the elasticity. Less and less people are signing up as you cut the price. And this is what Henry Ford found out with the Model T, that you commoditize your product when you're telling people, hey, the price is what really matters. And it's such a reductive product like the Model T, where you take content and, you know, interfaces and all the things that make things interesting in cars, you take all that out
Right.
to reduce
Yeah.
cost and weight and everything, that further commoditized the product. So I think we're basically where we were with the Model T in the late teens when Henry has cut the price from 810 to about $500.
Right.
But he's commoditized the Model T, refused to put colors into it, tried to
Yes.
simplify it, kind of justifying, hey, if I cut the price enough, there'll be more farmers that will buy this and get rid of their horses. Chevrolet turns out to be the number one brand in the U.S. And actually, Henry Ford was only a year away from going bankrupt. He
Wow.
almost bankrupted the company.
Wow. There's quite an important lesson there for Tesla in a way, I think.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. But then, so I mean, just to give you some impression of what's going on here, because we've got a lot of electric vehicles on display here. But I think what's exciting for us, a lot of Mustangs,
Good.
Mach-E's. We've got a few of electric transits, but we've also got a privately owned F-150 Lightning, which
Great.
is getting a lot of attention. So
Is
I
that
know
a drug
that,
dealer?
yes. So it's
A
yeah.
drug dealer from Birmingham?
I don't, I'm not sure. I really hope not, but but that would be quite
Maybe,
cool if it was.
yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe, yeah. I could guess which, yeah. Well, my family's lived in the UK for the last 7 years, so
Right,
we
right,
live in Kensington, and when I ran Ford of Europe, I lived in your country, and
right.
um, I've been watching the Chinese quickly
Yes,
escalate in the UK.
yeah,
Along with Norway and the Netherlands, UK is kind of one of the most open markets
yeah,
um, for EVs. So and already the electric Maxus is outselling us in electric vans than the e-Transit. So
right, right. No, but there's been so many people here today looking at those models, and I mean that because that was really the first time we've got a really big commercial vehicle section
mm,
here with a lot of different. And so we've got some really big heavy trucks as well as vans and
that's right.
delivery vans, and
That's cool.
that's clearly coming through. We've actually where I'm sitting, I'm looking at an electric aircraft which I have flown in,
Mm,
which was it's like being in an aircraft. It wasn't any different, just
mm.
quieter. That's all. An area that I really want to talk about is what is the kind of big decisions that it feels like Ford are making about electrification. It's not you're not making a couple of token models. You're going. I mean, how many electric models are coming out? I've got it on a list somewhere, but you've got a lot coming out in the next few years. I think I have. What is
Yeah.
it?
Well,
Yeah.
with Ford, I don't know what the cricket analogy is, but the American baseball analogy is there's 9 innings in a U.S. baseball game. We're kind of just beginning the second inning. And,
Right.
in our society, everyone wants the answer, what the ninth inning answer is going to be, and we don't
Yeah.
know.
No.
But as we enter the second inning, for the last 2 years, we've been working on our second generation product. We're now working on third generation. And the second generation product turns out to be really more targeted. What we've noticed commercially is that most of the established companies are failing in the EV side. They are selling and they're coming up with new models. But when you look at how much they invested, how big the plants were, how much capital they put at risk, and basically, what customers are doing and buying, it's not panning out commercially. So, and the worst is kind of the premium players.
Right.
And we can get into that. But we decided in our second generation to do something very different than other companies. Our first three generation products were, we electrified our most iconic products. So F-150, as you said,
Yeah.
Mustang, but we made it an SUV, and then Transit, the best selling van in the world. And we didn't know what we didn't know. That was 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. So we've learned a lot in the last 2 years. We've been working on re-aiming our capital and our investments in different areas than the first generation products. And we don't want to go where everyone else is. We want to electrify. What we've learned about electrification is it's actually not about propulsion system, although that's interesting. It's really about what you can do outside of the propulsion system and
Yeah.
also the software. So because it's a digital product, and our first generation EVs were analog products. So um, we're going to electrify commercial, larger three-row crossovers, pickup trucks, you know, high performance vehicles. We don't want to make commodity products. We want to participate in the part of the market where Ford knows the customer really well, and we can innovate on their behalf for things that they don't know they need. For example, the F-150, the main reason why people are buying the F-150, more than half the customers are new to a full-size truck, is because it can power their house for 3 days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we didn't know that a mobile battery on a white work site was going to be that evocative as a reason to buy a vehicle. We thought it was going to be 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. We were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so the exportable power turns out to be really the main reason why people are excited about the Lightning, and we guessed at that. I mean, it was like a feature we put on at the very end of the
Right.
development of the vehicle. So I don't think you're going
That
to
is
see us
extraordinary, isn't
like
it?
others where we're going to be pounding our chest saying we have 27 electric models for
Yeah.
all customers. No,
Right.
that's not our strategy.
Yeah. But I mean, that was I remember it's an anecdote I heard from someone who worked at Ford, and I now can't remember, but about the Super Bowl advert for the F-150,
Mm.
that it had all the kind of standard sort of images for a big tough truck and people driving it off road and all that stuff kind of thing. But the thing that really resonated when they did research into the reaction, I'm sure you know about this, was the fact that you see the guy plug the car in his house, there's a power cut, and he turns the power on in his house, and everybody went, I want that. That
Yeah,
was clearly what
because
you
our
were saying.
grid
I mean,
is
it was
very unreliable now. We had huge flooding in Texas.
yeah,
There's lots of extreme weather now in Florida. California has outages during the drought.
yeah,
And so people don't realize that in the United States, it's very common for people to have power outages for days on end.
yeah,
And so this turns out to be, and also lockable storage, the frunk, in a pickup truck, pretty much everything you carry in it is susceptible to theft.
yeah,
And the front power frunk, we call it the mega frunk, um, is bigger than, the hatch for our best selling sedans.
right,
So
yeah,
now there's this lockable storage that can be, you could put really valuable things in, and a pickup truck actually, and also the F-150 Lightning is the only vehicle with that can carry 3 child seats as an electric.
right, right.
It's
Wow, yeah,
really big. It's like
yeah, it
so much
is really
bigger than
big.
everyone else's electric vehicle. So even though it
Yeah,
looks very traditional, actually we found out that what people find interesting about it actually isn't really the propulsion system. That's cool,
yeah.
but what's really differentiating about it is the other stuff.
Right. Yeah, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, it's certainly a big topic here. Is vehicle to home, vehicle to grid charging, all that sort
Yeah.
of stuff is becoming a really big thing. And I think I believe, in fact, California's recently legislated to say you have all vehicles must have bidirectional charging capability. I don't know if that's the case. We heard about that yesterday, but I don't know if
We're
that's
really struggling with this because
yeah,
the utility industry in the US is every utility has a different jurisdiction
yeah,
geographically, and we have to come up with a pricing mechanism so to reward people to take electrons out of their vehicles during
yeah,
peak usage to have to prevent having to build more nuclear plants or more
yeah,
coal natural gas plants. And the whole grid is built for that peak moment in
yeah.
summer or and on a really hot day, especially in places like Arizona, California, and Florida. And we've had a lot of difficulty actually coming
Right,
up with a pricing mechanism and even the utilities' interest in pulling electrons out of the batteries of the vehicles. And
right,
we think it's really important. Tesla has its own energy company, and so it doesn't strategically, it probably will never have, um, two-way charging,
right.
because it wants to sell its power walls and its
Yes,
charging system. But at Ford, we have no ambition to go into the power industry and energy storage. So for us, this is a really important thing for our country and
yeah,
but we've had a lot of difficult. I mean, there are a lot of press releases, Robert, but if
yes.
you look at like how many people are selling electrons back to the grid,
It's
it's
very,
not
very,
a,
yeah,
it's
it's
very
very
few
few.
now, and that's very frustrating for us.
Yeah, yeah. But then, well, the other one that we have, and I think this is more a European thing than a North American thing, is the desire for smaller cars. And as you mentioned, China. I mean, one of the things we've noticed, and the three most recent cars we've unveiled at our live shows are all Chinese. They were all
Right.
small,
Okay.
and they are coming into Europe in quite big numbers
Oh yeah.
now, and
Oh yes.
then they're well made cars. I remember seeing BYD cars at the Geneva Motor Show probably now 13 years ago, and I'm not a bodywork aficionado. I don't know that much about automotive manufacturing, but I could tell these looked a little bit dangerous and loosely put together. Not now. These cars are as good as anything built in Europe or North America. I mean, they've really, and that's got to be. I mean, I'm assuming this is something that you will discuss at Ford, that this is a thing that's really, they have been very busy really in particularly the last
Well,
5 years in China.
this should be no surprise to anyone. Um, you know, we've been watching this for years now
Yeah.
play out, and I've always said that our main competition in the pure electric space is going to be BYD and Geely and Tesla. I mean, that's our
Right.
competition. It's not General
Yeah.
Motors. It's not going to be
No.
BMW or Volkswagen. The competition is and of course their battery chemistry LFP is far superior
Yeah.
from thermal risk. It can handle twice the number of fast charge cycles. So we're the largest commercial brand in Europe. Actually, Transit's the number one best-selling vehicle in the UK. We're also globally number one in commercial. And for commercial, LFP outside of China, LFP is a perfect chemistry
Right.
because even though it has lower density, it's 20-30% cheaper for the customer. It has twice the number of charge cycles, and it pretty much never has any fire risk. Um, and the vehicles coming to Europe and to the UK are going to be LFP cells.
Yeah.
That's the predominant. I think it's 70% of the volume in China. And now I think China is 5 or 6 times bigger than the European market in scale
Yeah.
and the people winning aren't the Western brands. The people winning in China are Chang'an, Shanghai Auto, Geely, BYD,
Yeah.
NIO, Li Auto, XPeng.
Yeah.
They're indigenous companies.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't. I mean, a lot of those companies do not have a legacy, effectively, of making
No,
combustion cars. I mean, they kind of they've got a
no.
fresh.
Well,
They've
even
started from a clean
it's a
slate.
good point on the branding side because what we see in China was there for 2 weeks, a couple weeks ago,
Right.
and because of COVID, as you said, it was all opaque to us in a way, um, but it's moved so fast. What's interesting is that in China, even the legacy, those that are successful in the EV business that had ICE products like Geely and SAIC and Chang'an,
Yeah.
they all started new brands because they realized that these are digital products, and what will
Right.
differentiate these products is not going to be, a noise, vibration, or harshness, or bigger engines or smaller engines or efficiency. It's going to be software,
Yeah.
and it's going to be charging. It's going to be physical experiences. So they knew that as long as they had ICE vehicles and EVs in the same brand, they would fail. So they
Right.
started
Wow.
sub brands. Every one of them has started sub brands
Yeah.
that aren't like their main company, and those sub brands vehicle, their identity and differentiation is not the physical hardware.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the premium brands have struggled so mightily, even Volkswagen, because they thought they could sell ICE and EV together in China, but for customers, they're smart. They know that, a VW ICE vehicle is fundamentally a different technology
Yeah.
than electric, and they want to buy all electric, all digital brands.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's certainly I think one of the things that we've experienced. The legacy automotive European companies have struggled with, because we know they can make really good cars. They can do really good suspension and steering and body, all that stuff they can do really well. But it's the software that is always the problem. I mean, the early Volkswagen, the ID3 that a neighbor of mine has, all the problems were software. The car was perfect. There was nothing wrong mechanically with it. It was the software that messed up quite often, and the charging was a problem.
Yes. If I
And that's
explain to, the listeners how crazy our software system is and why it's so difficult for legacy car companies to get software right, well, I'll do it very quickly.
yeah,
So to save probably $500 a vehicle, or let's say 350 quid a vehicle,
yeah,
we farmed out all the modules that control the vehicles to our suppliers because we could bid them against each other. So Bosch would do the body control module, someone else would do the seat control module, someone else would do the engine control module.
right,
And we'd have about 150 of these modules of semiconductors all through the car. The problem is the software are all written by, 150 different companies, and they don't talk to each other.
right,
And so even though it says Ford on the front,
yeah,
I actually have to go to Bosch to get permission to change their seat control software.
right,
So
wow,
even if I had a high-speed modem in the vehicle and I had the ability to write their software, it's actually their IP. And I have 150, we call it the loose confederation of software providers, 150 completely different
wow,
software programming languages. All the structure of the software is different. It's millions of code, and we can't even understand it all.
yeah,
So that's why at Ford, we've decided in the second generation product to completely insource the electric architecture.
right,
And to do that, you need to write all the software yourself. But just remember, car companies haven't written software like this
yeah,
ever. They've
yes,
never written software. So we're literally writing how the vehicle operates, um, the software to operate the vehicle for the first time ever.
yeah, yeah. And
We
that's
have
the
to
big.
insource it.
Yeah, that is the. I mean, that's the big change that I always want to. And I've discussed this with numerous people in the automotive sector. And the general public might just don't get that because it's just a car. We bought a car 10
Sure.
years ago, and my dad had a Ford when I was a kid, and
Hmm.
it was just that way, and they worked, and that was fine, and everybody understood how they worked. And now suddenly it's a different machine. I've always said this. It is
Oh, for sure.
and that's the big challenge for companies like Ford to make
That's why
that
I had to split
transition.
the business. I had to split the company into 3 pieces because
Right.
I kept watching our ICE engineers try to figure out, how to do over their updates or change the software for the vehicle. They didn't know. They're not software people.
Yeah.
So we had to attract new talent, and actually some of the Ford people are really important because you can get the best software person from Apple, but they don't know anything about safety critical systems.
No.
You don't want to fire an airbag off the cloud. You need to do
Yes.
that in the vehicle.
Yeah.
So you need a mix of traditional people, but you got to make that decision. Do you cut and do it all yourself,
Yeah.
or you keep trying with these modules in your supply chain?
Yeah.
And I watch way too many companies continue to try. I won't name the names because they're competitors, but it's shocking to me,
Yeah.
how many people are sticking with very old electric architectures and software from other people, Confederacy. It will never work. And no matter
Yeah.
how many software engineers they hire, your
Yeah.
car's not going to work. You're going to
Yeah.
have problems. So we've just decided to go student body left on that and insource it all,
Yeah.
like Henry
That,
Ford would have done.
it's exactly. So is that? I mean, and that's the thing. I think when I finally understood that the path that Ford was on, it's in fact it's in its DNA. It's the tradition. It was
Yeah.
that thing of you bring in some pig iron and some wood and some steel and some
Yeah.
copper at one end of a factory, and a car comes out the other. And I mean, that was effectively what Henry Ford did, wasn't it? I mean, he was really the first
Yeah.
to do that.
My grandfather worked on the line the year the assembly line was brought. He used to make the cars, and everyone would make them at once. And then he
Right.
innovated at the PCAP plant and so he got really sick of making a lot of other people rich with this. So the Dodge brothers, for example, they used to make
Right.
all the bodies for Model T, and then the Dodge brothers turned around with all the money they were making on the Model T and competed with us. So he's
Yes.
like, I don't like this at all. And so he built the Rouge plant, which is about a mile from where I am right now. My
Right.
grandfather worked, And yeah, we bring in silicate, we bring in iron ore from
Right.
Lake Superior, and basically out the back in 1928 came the Model A, and he
Yeah.
just got sick of he wanted to totally vertically integrate because he hated waste. And if
Right.
you hate waste, you want to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
The issue with that is over the last 80 years, we've been breaking that model apart because we could, save labor by having
Yeah.
this part made in another country.
Yeah.
And so we could bring the cost down actually faster by reducing the vertical integration. But
Right.
when technology comes around like this big change, whether it's embedded electric architecture or these new EV components, you can't delegate that to supply chain. You
Yeah.
have to, if you want to be different than everyone else and you want to be better, you have to go to silicon carbide inverters before other people. You have
Yeah.
to design your motors more efficiently than other people. And socially, we have so many hourly workers and the cars are simpler. So they're 30-40% less labor content. So if we just
Right.
turned all of our plants over to electric, we'd have to let go 30% of our people.
Right.
And so vertical integration has a different another advantage is
Yeah.
that we can actually give our team new jobs that are they're sustainable, that they
Right.
they will have a job for the next 50 years, making motors, inverters,
Right.
gearboxes, things that we used to outsource. We never made axles or differentials for internal combustion engines, but we
Right.
brought all that in-house because and the people that really understand the electric transition, they didn't understand that it created just as many problems, like the labor overhang,
Right.
that they hadn't thought about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it is fascinating how the changes you're talking about. I mean, I find it very encouraging because, in a sense, I now understand enough about that transition to realise that what Ford is doing has to be done, and I'm not seeing that with other companies. I mean, we don't need to mention any other companies'
Yeah.
names, but that any other existing companies. It's really struck me in the last year that for the decisions Ford has made, which I'm assuming you have a very large say in, have really. I think it's the one standout legacy automotive manufacturer. It's one of the. I don't know if you were. Is Ford the earliest? Probably. I suppose you could say Mercedes Benz is the
Yeah.
oldest.
Yeah, I
But
would agree with you there.
yeah,
But, we've been probably making affordable vehicles for the longest.
yes, yeah,
And, we have the second largest engineering center in the UK in Essex, and they
yeah,
design our global transits, right? So for all those people in Essex, they all have
yeah,
families, and we're a family company, what is Jim Farley gonna do to
yeah,
make sure that not only they're working on the coolest technology, but that they have a future?
yeah,
Um, and now with electric transits, we have that future globally. We've globalized transit. We used to have different vans around the world, and then we just
yeah.
decided, hey, we like this Essex team. They're going to do it for the whole globe.
Right.
Um,
Wow, fantastic. Yeah,
and so I'd say the transition. We're in the second inning, so like people still don't understand all the second and third order issues we have to work through. 80-90% of lithium and nickel is processed in China.
yeah,
Do we onshore all that?
yeah,
Yeah, even if it's mined in Indonesia or South America, it still gets shipped to China for
yeah,
processing, and it's a really dirty process to process these raw materials
yeah,
into slurries that we put in batteries. So I think we're now really looking those issues in the eye and
yeah,
excited about solving them one by one, just like we did in the teens with combustion.
yeah. And I mean, because you've got, from what I can gather, you've got plans then to build large battery factories in the United States. I
Yeah.
mean, that is definitely a plan. I can't. Well, yeah, and
There's some
that is going here.
we have I think we're up to 5 plants now. We're the largest employer in the US in auto, and we're the
Right.
number 1 brand in the US, and we kind of bet on the US. A lot of our competitors build a lot in Mexico and Canada, and we haven't. We build 100% of our pickup trucks, for example, in the US. We're the only one. So You
Right.
know, we have been building the battery plants. It's hard to scale battery plants. Like, I
Yeah.
have to tell you, building the plant's the easy part, but
Yeah.
actually building cells in high quality at a high scale is much harder than we thought, even though
Right.
we've been building stuff for 120 years.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder than we thought, and then, goodness gracious, to go back and get into the supply chain. We now pretty much vertically integrate all the raw material purchases. So we're going to the
Right.
mine and buying the raw materials and then arranging for the processing and all the way to our battery plants. And that's all new. Like, we've had to
Yeah.
hire thousands of new people,
Right.
mineral experts, processing experts, logistics experts, actually, child labor and corruption,
Yeah.
because we have to make sure that this is all done the right way. When people buy that electric car, they probably have no idea how much of a shift it is and how much
Yes.
know-how we have to get.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, is your long term? I mean, just to clarify for me, because I think you did mention this earlier on, but is your long term aim to build effectively a cheaper, smaller electric vehicles as well as
Mm,
upmarket ones? Because I mean, that is yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned that before, but that
yeah,
that is part of
I
the
think,
route.
this is one of the biggest strategy decisions for the company. This is kinda like going back to the Model T.
Yeah.
And what's exciting about the project is that we can put, driver safety technology in the vehicle now to bring your insurance costs down, and we could even design the vehicle to be physically upgradable, over time, like an Airbus or a Boeing
Yeah.
fuselage, because, you know, it would make sense to do that. So it's a very exciting project, but I think we're approaching it with a lot of humility, but because it's Ford and the Model T and everything, but also because we wanna think about it better than everyone else for the customer so that we bring something new to the party. We don't wanna just make another generic, affordable EV, because I think there's gonna be plenty of those.
Yeah.
But what is Ford really gonna do differently, bring to the party for customers that are different in that space? And I think we're deeply into answering that question now. I think one of the things that I see, as we now know pretty much the first 3 shippable software to the car, kinda like your iPhone in '08, where you're doing email and listening to music for the first time on your phone. We kinda know what the first 3 software, we think that that the affordable vehicles will be a really difficult interior experience because of all the information. It's gonna be really intimidating. So
Yeah.
customizing the digital aspect of the vehicle is gonna be, we think, a real difference maker. Um, and we think basically that the car will be very difficult to make money on. It'll be really more the software and physical experience and the second and third owner as much as the first. And that's how we're starting to think about this opportunity for Ford, because we wanna bring something different,
Yeah. Yeah.
better.
Yes, I mean it seems a golden opportunity.
Yes.
It's a very different technology. It should spread too. It's a very different experience for customers, for people who buy the
Yeah.
car, for how they use it,
Yes.
how the car's second life, third life, all that stuff.
Totally
Yeah,
agree with you. And
yeah,
also the winners and losers are different. So for a company, just put business hat on for a second, the Toyotas, the very high volume brands, let's say they struggle in electric. This is a chance for a medium-sized company like Ford globally to get
yeah,
back into segments that we left a long time ago. We're just finishing the Fiesta production because we're going to the MEB plant in Cologne. So, I mean, the Fiesta, right? I mean, that's like,
yeah,
there's nothing
yeah,
more British than a Ford
yes,
Fiesta.
yeah,
Um, so, you know, we but there's so much competition from BMW and
yeah,
Volkswagen in the ICE world. So in the EV world, though, it's an open playing field.
yeah, yeah,
So we can go back into segments, but we have to bring our A game and bring something
yeah,
different, like we did in '76 when we launched the Fiesta in Europe. So I think it's a chance to really grow
yeah.
again.
No, I really well. I've written. I'm rooting for you, as you chaps say in America. No, I think it's great, and I really, really appreciate this conversation, Jim. It's been really fascinating to talk to you, and it's been, and I really, well, we're really looking forward to seeing what you produce, and it's been a thrill for us. It's been, I've got to tell you, the fact that we have the F-150, even if it does belong to a drug dealer from Birmingham, which I'm sure it doesn't, but if it did, but what we've seen is people just go to it. It's like, it's like a magnet. There's a lot of interest in it.
We were sold. We actually 2 weeks ago we put the F-150 on sale in Norway, and it was sold out in like the whole production for the year was sold out in Norway in like a week. So can you explain what's going on over there? Why? I never thought my wildest dream that F-150 Lightning would be this popular in Europe. What am I missing?
I don't know, because I literally could not take it to my house. It would not, because I live on a very narrow old lane.
Right.
It would be, I'd have to go through a hedge and drive through a field. It's the only way. There's no way it would fit down. So it's a big vehicle. You would think. I think people are just fascinated by what it represents.
I
think that's the thing. Right. I don't know that the audience that we saw clamoring around it today are going to be buying F-150s here. Some of them will, I'm sure. But I think they're just fascinated by the fact that a company as big and as well established as Ford has made something that big and that impressive. Everyone was really impressed with even the early videos you released of it towing things. That was like, you went, oh my God, because when people say, oh, electric vehicle can't tow, well, here's one towing a train full of F-150s.
So what's interesting about that to me is that the F-150 Lightning, people wouldn't know this, but we're talking about it, so I'll tell you. The F-150 Lightning was a complete pariah inside the company. Like, most people were like, why are we doing that? That's a really stupid project. And we had a group we called Team Edison because of Mr. Ford's friendship with Thomas Edison.
Right.
We created, and they had to actually leave the company. We put them in downtown Detroit in a separate building, and they came up with that concept of the vehicle. And they happened to report to me, and I watched the company kind of, push against them, like literally try to kill the project. And it was a small group, like most good things in life. It was a small group in a very small building, fighting for this idea. They continued to engineer it. I think the first range estimate for the Lightning was 100 miles. We got it to 325. Right. And like every week they come into my office, Jim, I think we got another 17 miles. and over the course of 3 years, we engineered this vehicle kind of against all the odds. And I guess it just proves, even in especially in big companies, good things are done in like janitor closets and challenge your projects, because that's what that was. It was not the mainstream company. It was a couple of people who fought for their ideas, and thank God for them.
Yeah. No, I think it's made a very big impact.
Interesting.
No, really interesting, Jim. We're going to have to pack up because we've got to clear out of our hall. But that's been a real privilege to talk to you. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here today. It's been fantastic.
Well, I'm really thankful. I've obviously watched your career, and I find it so fascinating that you have chosen this particular topic as important work in your life. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing to push our industry into the future. It's people like you who are the voice of so many customers for us. And it was a privilege to meet you today.
That's great. No, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Jim. So thank you very much, Jim, and thank you for listening. I think this was a fascinating episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please do, as I mentioned before, I'll just do it quickly. Please do subscribe. Do join us again for the next episode that comes out next week. And tell all your friends about it. And as always, if you have been, thank you for listening.